Good morning. My name is Tim Lewis, and I am deeply honored to serve as a member of the executive committee of this summit. I am also honored to have the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Jeff Blattner, who will offer some personal reflections on our work here at this summit and what led to it. Jeff and I share some of these personal insights. As a seventh-generation Pittsburgher and an African-American son of Squirrel Hill who grew up just 3 blocks from the Tree of Life Synagogue, I think it's fair to say that my life has in many ways been shaped by an array of social and cultural influences. My family integrated Squirrel Hill in 1957 when I was 3 years old, and I practically grew up at the Tree of Life Synagogue. That's where my friends taught me to sing the Haftorah. It's where, which I can still sing today, by the way. It's where I learned the blessings for the wine and the bread, and it's where, as a child, the rabbi gave me my own tallis and yarmulke because I was there so often with my friends. Jeff Blattner was one of those friends, and I suppose it was inevitable that we would become close. Jeff's family knew all too well about hatred. His parents, Edie and Walter, had barely escaped Nazi Germany after Hitler came to power in the 1930s. They knew what it was to be persecuted, and thus they knew the importance of uplifting and protecting certain fundamental human values: dignity, respect, and the universal truth that we are indeed one another's keeper. And so in the late 1950s and early 60s, when some were still trying to run my family out of Squirrel Hill, Jeff and his family were among those who grabbed our hands, pulled us forward, and ran with us right through the hatred toward love and truth and friendship and equality. That's what I saw, and that's what I learned, and that's how we formed a bond as children that continues to this day. I went off to boarding school while Jeff went to Taylor Alderdice High School and then to the University of Pennsylvania, from which he graduated summa cum laude, and then to Harvard Law School, from which he also graduated with high honors. He then clerked for a federal judge before landing a much-coveted clerkship on the United States Supreme Court with Justice Potter Stewart. We lost touch for a while as our careers unfolded, but our paths would cross again when Jeff was in the Senate. Ted Kennedy was, by any measure, one of the most consequential senators of the 20th century. And Jeff's next stop was the Senate Judiciary Committee as a member of Senator Kennedy's staff, where he oversaw 6 Supreme Court nominations and worked on critical legislation. He then became the senator's chief counsel, leading the way on major civil rights legislation, including the Fair Housing Act amendments of 1988 and the Civil Rights Act of 1981. In fact, it is fair to say, as Senator Kennedy himself as much as said, that without Jeff's wisdom and commitment, there might never have been a Civil Rights Act of 1991. And on a personal note, Jeff was also there in 1991 to ever so quietly shepherd the nomination of his childhood friend through the Senate confirmation process to the Federal District Court, and then to do it again a year later to the United States Court of Appeals, right on the eve of a presidential election, which is almost unheard of. Jeff served on the presidential transitions of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. He served as an assistant attorney general at the Department of Justice, and today he serves as a special assistant attorney general in Colorado, where he now lives. Most recently, Jeff was elected as board chair of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, HIAS, an organization that continues to do great and important work on behalf of refugees throughout the world. Throughout his life and his distinguished career, Jeff Blattner has embodied the tenets Dr. King discussed in his letter from a Birmingham jail. Chief among these is what Dr. King described as the noblest use of love, embedded in the ancient Greek philosophy of agape. Agape, Dr. King wrote, is an understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all, a willingness to go to any lengths to restore community, to meet hate with love, and to appreciate that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This love and these ethics, these principles are alive right here in this room and in the work we are doing at this summit. They have always been a defining presence in Jeff Blattner's life and in his heart and in his work. So would you please join me in welcoming home a fellow toiler in the vineyard of the law and in our collective effort to eradicate hate, someone I am proud to call my friend of a lifetime, and as he and I call one another, my brother. I give you Jeff Blattner.
Wow. I want to thank my brother, Judge Tim Lewis, for his far too generous introduction. And after hearing his eloquence, I can assure you it's downhill from here. Tim was an outstanding judge, and he is an outstanding lawyer. In his work and in his life, he walks the walk of advancing equal justice for all. Most importantly, he is a Pittsburgh guy with a heart as big as that football field across the river, the one that used to be named for a local ketchup and now is named after who knows what. If you're wondering why I'm here, Tim deserves all of the credit and none of the blame for what follows. I want to express my appreciation to the organizers of this amazing conference and my admiration for all of you, speakers and attendees, who are on the front lines of combating hatred in all its ugly forms. As Winston Churchill said in 1941, a time when hate appeared to be on the march around the world, never give in, never give in, never, 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 never give in, except to convictions of honor and good sense. I am here today, as Tim said, as a son of Squirrel Hill, a charming neighborhood not far from here, filled with lovely old homes and people from all backgrounds, races, and faiths. I am here as one who had his bar mitzvah at Tree of Life back in the Stone Age, and as one who had a young camper named Cecil Rosenthal many years ago at Camp Deer Creek in Indianola, Pennsylvania. Cecil was gunned down in the massacre. May his memory and those of all who perished be a blessing. I am also here as someone who is honored to serve as chair of the Board of HIAS, the oldest refugee assistance organization in the world, one founded more than 140 years ago to resettle Jewish refugees in the United States, and one which now assists all those who are forcibly displaced because of who they are or what they believe, here in the United States and in more than 16 countries. HIAS is the organization whose good works in collaboration with the congregations at Tree of Life prompted the gunman to loose his lethal hatred upon Tree of Life, upon Pittsburgh and the world. I stand before you as a Pittsburgh guy, albeit one who hasn't lived here for many years. Believe me, I am a Pittsburgh guy, a guy who cheered outside my elementary school when Maz hit the big one, and one whose mood to this day, like that of most Pittsburghers, is closely correlated with the performance of the black and gold. I am living proof that you can take the guy out of Pittsburgh, but you can't take Pittsburgh out of the guy. On the day of the shooting, as I sat overwhelmed by the horrible loss suffered by my neighborhood and my hometown, an old friend reached out to ask me to write something about the extraordinary city and community in which I was fortunate to grow up. What I wrote on that terrible day in 2018 was published in the Washington Post, and to my surprise, reprinted in the Post-Gazette here and newspapers around the country. It was later named one of the Post's favorite op-eds of 2018. My message then, and what I would like to talk about now, is what Pittsburgh might teach us about countering the polarization that was tearing America apart in 2018. Polarization that, by all accounts, is even worse today than it was 4 years ago. I wrote that the Pittsburgh of my youth was not a melting pot. It was a rich ethnic stew of Irish, Italian, Slavs, Poles, Scots, African Americans, Lebanese, and Jews, among many others. We didn't always get along, but we saw ourselves as members of one community, one town, as we Pittsburghers say. In a time of widespread economic hardship brought on by the collapse of the steel industry, we were united by a shared sense that our beautiful city was under distress, underappreciated, and over-disparaged. After all, the writer James Parton, a Boston guy no less, had once referred to Pittsburgh as hell with the lid off. It was sports that brought us together. Wherever each of us may or may not have worshiped earlier in the weekend, we all worshiped together at Three Rivers Stadium on Sunday afternoons in the fall. We were all Pittsburghers. We were all us, not us and them, us. That is true today. If you watch the Steeler game on Sunday, a game that was not easy on the eyes, you didn't see any red terrible towels. You didn't see any blue terrible towels. You only saw black and gold terrible towels. Many others recognized this after the Tree of Life tragedy. Academy Award-winning actor Tom Hanks, with whom I am never confused, put it well after getting to know the city when he played Mr. Rogers in a film here. A visitor here, he said, will learn of the unbreakable bond shared by all who wear the black and gold, a connection stronger than the iron and steel forged in the furnaces of this city, here in the American heart. My op-ed was criticized in some quarters for being a little wide-eyed about my hometown. Maybe so, maybe so. Yes, Pittsburgh had and has many flaws. Yes, it turned its back on injustice far too many times. Yes, there are many here in the city and in surrounding communities who are struggling. All of that is true. But we share something fundamental with everyone who lives here, a pride of place, and above all, a sense of community. The Bucks, back when they were good, said it best: we are family. To be sure, pride of place in a city or in a country can be a good thing or a bad one. What separates one from the other is a sense of inclusion, of welcoming those who follow the rules and who want to be productive members of the community. That's how Pittsburgh welcomed my father when he came here after fleeing Nazi Germany alone at age 15. Perhaps one or two of you shopped at his store, the Surrey shop, many years ago. That's how Pittsburgh welcomed my mother, who fled Nazi Germany at age 8, along with her parents. That's how Pittsburgh welcomed a generation of immigrants from foreign lands. Those immigrants, their descendants, and yes, the descendants of those who were shipped to America against their will. We are all Pittsburghers. We are all us. That's what Pittsburgh can teach America. Imagine if everyone in America felt about America and Americans the way Pittsburghers feel about Pittsburgh and each other. And imagine an America where we are all us. Robert Kennedy imagined such an America. In an extemporaneous speech in April 1968, when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, he said, "In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it is perhaps well to ask what kind of nation we are and what direction we want to move in. We can move in the direction of greater polarization, filled with hatred toward one another, or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence with an effort to understand, compassion, and love." Those weren't just words. In 1968, Robert Kennedy went to Appalachian, Kentucky to focus public attention on the plight of the white working poor. He made similar trips to highlight the plight of African Americans in rural Mississippi and Latinos in California. To Robert Kennedy, their problems were our problems. So it should be today. As I wrote in 2018, the problems of rural America and urban America, coastal America and middle America, red America and blue America are all our problems. I didn't know Robert Kennedy, but I was privileged to know his brother, Senator Edward Kennedy, and to work for him for many years. Ted Kennedy was, in his time, thought of by many as a polarizing figure, but the senator would and did work with anyone and everyone, regardless of party, to serve the common good. Just yesterday, I was on a panel with a member of President George W. Bush's cabinet who recounted her joy in working with the senator on legislation to benefit school kids around the country. Ted Kennedy and George Bush disagreed vehemently on many things. They said some less than flattering things about each other, a lot less than flattering. But if someone had said to Senator Kennedy that George Bush was not a patriot or didn't love America, he would have looked at you like you were nuts. They saw one another as fellow Americans, as part of a bigger us. Now, you may be wondering, what about the hate-filled minority that supports the use of violence and other unlawful means to achieve their ends? What about them? Those who have already tipped over into the hatred that exploded in bloodshed here in Pittsburgh and in many other places around the country have no place in the American community and no place in the American us. Another Pittsburgh guy you might have heard of, the actor Michael Keaton, with whom I am also never confused, said of our hometown, "If you want to see a city that's far, far stronger than hate, you should go to Pittsburgh. If you want to see a city that's tolerant, accepting, inclusive, and compassionate, you should go to Pittsburgh. If you want to bring hate, racism, prejudice, and division, you should go to hell." Those who have surrendered to hate have no place here. You are the experts on how to combat that hatred. It must be fought at every turn, and it must be defeated. What I am talking about is how to build an America where the preconditions for that hatred, the anger, alienation, and despair that feed resentment and foment bigotry, are far less prevalent, where we can do more to stop violent hatred before it starts. To paraphrase Frederick Douglass, it is easier to build an inclusive society than to repair a polarized one. Giving people hope and opportunity is better than trying to turn them away from despair and resentment. Reducing polarization will require us to change how we think, how we talk, how we listen, and how we act. How we think matters. Some academic research suggests that if we see someone with a different view as similar to us, then talking and listening will bring us closer together. Conversely, if we see that person as part of a different them, then talking is more likely to drive us apart. One of my favorite quotations is from a speech given by Judge Learned Hand during the Second World War. "The spirit of liberty," he said, "is the spirit which is not too sure that it is right. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which seeks to understand the mind of other men and women. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which weighs their interests alongside its own without bias. Take that in for a moment. The spirit of liberty is not too sure that it is right. To live in a free society, one must accept the possibility that there may be some merit in someone else's position. That possibility brings with it a need to listen and to seek common ground where we can. Not in compromising with hatred, mind you, not in compromising with bigotry, but as Han put it, in weighing the other guy's interests alongside our own. Reducing polarization, however, will take far more than changing how we think and listen to one another. Treating all Americans as part of us demands a great deal from each of us. It means more than tipping your server. It means more than applauding the healthcare worker risking her life every day during a pandemic. It means more than thinking on Thanksgiving of the farmer who puts food on your table. It means wanting them and their children and the men and women who fight our wars, make what we use, deliver what we buy, and yes, extract what we burn. Those who huddle in the shadows of our richest cities and those who live where the economy has moved on, as it once did here in Pittsburgh itself, to want them to have lives as filled with promise and security as we want for members of our own families. Seeing everyone as part of us means imagining America where, like a family, everyone has a seat at the table, where sometimes we do what the little one wants, even when everybody else has to sacrifice, where we do our best to cushion the impact of decisions we make to benefit some when they cause harm to others. That will require new policies and approaches by our elected leaders and by the leaders of our largest companies and institutions. If politics is a lopsided zero-sum game, if short-term profits are the only metric, if the children of the privileged have all the opportunities, then what will stop the cycle of hopelessness, despair, and resentment that feeds polarization and hate? If we are serious about stopping polarization, then elected officials and CEOs and university presidents and leaders of institutions large and small must evaluate their actions against this simple standard. Will it bring us together or will it drive us apart? In closing, let me again express my deep respect and true admiration for those assembled here. Keep up the fight against hatred with all of the tools, all of the expertise, all of the skills, and all of the passion and commitment present here today, but also to teach those who have not drunk from the poison chalice of hatred, we must work together to reduce polarization. And if you want to reduce polarization, if you want to stop hatred from taking root, if you want to keep America together, follow Pittsburgh's lesson and start seeing everyone as part of us. And us starts with you. Thank you, and may God bless Pittsburgh and our country. Go Steelers, and let's go Pens.